In 2020, a company that had survived the Civil War, 2 world wars, the Great Depression, and 2 centuries of American history filed for bankruptcy for the second time in 3 years. Not because the product was bad, not because Americans stopped buying guns. In fact, gun sales that year hit record highs. The company went bankrupt because a Wall Street hedge fund had loaded it with nearly $1 billion in debt, and then walked away. The company was Remington, founded in 1816. Older than the state of Texas, older than the telephone, the light bulb, and the automobile. The brand that put a rifle in the hands of Union soldiers at Gettysburg, Allied troops at Normandy, and American hunters in every deer stand from Maine to Montana for 200 years, gone, broken into pieces, sold off like furniture at an estate sale. And here's the question worth sitting with before we go any further. How does a company survive 200 years of American history, only to be killed in 13 by one private equity firm that never made a single gun? The year is 1816. A 23-year-old blacksmith named Eliphalet Remington II lives in Herkimer County, New York. He can't afford to buy a rifle, so he decides to make one. He forges the barrel himself at his father's forge, walks to the local shooting range, and enters a competition. He doesn't win, but the other shooters notice the barrel. They want one. He makes them. Word spreads, orders come in. Within a few years, Eliphalet Remington is no longer a blacksmith, he is a gun maker. By 1828, he had moved operations to Alien, New York, on the banks of the Erie Canal, a location that gave him direct access to raw materials and shipping routes to the entire eastern seaboard. The Alien factory would become one of the most consequential manufacturing sites in American history. It would operate continuously for nearly 200 years. What made Remington different from the beginning wasn't just quality. It was scale. While other gun makers were still building firearms one at a time by hand, Remington embraced precision manufacturing with interchangeable parts, every component built to exact tolerances, every rifle consistent. That philosophy turned a small upstate New York forge into an industrial powerhouse. And that's the thing to remember as this story unfolds. Remington wasn't built on marketing. It wasn't built on branding. It was built on the idea that if you made something right, truly right, with precision and pride, people would trust it with their lives, literally. That trust would take nearly 2 centuries to build. It would take 13 years to destroy. By the time the Civil War broke out in 1861, Remington was already one of the largest firearms manufacturers in the country. The Union Army needed rifles, fast, reliable, and in enormous quantities. Remington delivered. The company produced over 100,000 rifles for Union forces during the war, cementing its reputation as the manufacturer America turned to when the stakes were highest. After the war, the world opened up. Remington exported rifles to France, Egypt, and Spain. The company pioneered the rolling block action, one of the strongest and most reliable rifle designs ever built, and sold it to armies on 5 continents. At one point in the 1870s, Remington was producing firearms for more foreign governments than any other manufacturer on Earth. Then came the Depression of 1873. Foreign contracts dried up. The domestic market collapsed. The Remington family, overextended and undercapitalized, lost control of the company in 1886. It was acquired by a group of investors, reorganized and relaunched. But the Remington name stayed on every barrel, because even in bankruptcy, that name meant something. That pattern, financial crisis, new ownership, survival, would repeat itself throughout Remington's history. The company went through the Great Depression. It survived labor strikes. It navigated the political battles of the 20th century. Every time, it came out the other side. Every time, the name on the barrel still meant precision, still meant reliability, still meant America. That streak ended in 2007, and the man who ended it never fired a shot. Enter Cerberus. In Greek mythology, Cerberus is the 3-headed dog that guards the gates of hell. In 2007, Cerberus Capital Management was a private equity firm based in Manhattan with $26 billion in assets under management. They were not gun people, they were money people. And in 2007, they saw an opportunity. The firearms industry was fragmented. Dozens of American gun brands, Remington, Marlin, Bushmaster, DPMS, H&R, New England Firearms, were operating independently, each with their own factories, supply chains, and overhead. Cerberus believed they could buy all of them, roll them into one massive conglomerate they called the Freedom Group, strip out the redundancies, and extract enormous profits. It was a classic private equity playbook, and it was financed the classic private equity way. Not with Cerberus's own money, but with debt, hundreds of millions of dollars in debt loaded directly onto the acquired companies. Remington, which had operated for nearly 2 centuries without this kind of financial burden, suddenly owed nearly $1 billion, with interest payments due whether the guns sold or not. Here's the part that should make your blood pressure rise. The people making these decisions, the ones deciding to eliminate skilled craftsmen, consolidate factories, and squeeze every possible cent out of manufacturing costs, had never built a gun, had never worked a production line, had never staked their reputation on the reliability of a product that someone's life might depend on. They were looking at spreadsheets. Remington's workers were looking at steel. The effects showed up fast, and the people who noticed first were the customers who knew these guns best. Marlin Firearms, which Remington absorbed in 2007, had been building lever-action rifles in New Haven, Connecticut for over 130 years. Experienced craftsmen who had spent careers perfecting the tolerances on those actions were let go. Production was consolidated. Cost-cutting became the priority. Gun owners started noticing. The pre-Remington Marlins, identifiable by the JM proof stamp from longtime quality inspector John Marlins, became collector's items almost overnight. People began paying double, sometimes triple, for the old ones. Not because they were rare, because they were right. The new ones weren't. The same story played out across the Freedom Group portfolio. Quality control reports piled up. Warranty claims increased. Forums and gun shops filled with complaints from customers who had trusted these names for decades and were now getting products that didn't meet the standard. And through all of it, the debt kept compounding. Remington needed strong sales just to service the interest payments. When President Obama's election in 2008 triggered a massive surge in gun buying, one of the biggest in American history, Remington should have thrived. Instead, the money went to debt service. When sales normalized after 2016, Remington had no cushion, no reserves, no room to maneuver. In March 2018, Remington filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy for the first time. The company that had survived the Civil War and 2 world wars couldn't survive 11 years of private equity ownership. The 2018 bankruptcy was supposed to be a reset. Debt restructured, operations stabilized, a path forward. It wasn't. The fundamental problems, a bloated conglomerate structure, hollowed-out manufacturing quality, a brand that serious gun buyers had begun to distrust, weren't fixed by a financial reorganization. They required something Cerberus was never going to provide: genuine investment in the product. Then July 2020 arrived. Remington filed for Chapter 11 again. This time, there was no restructuring. The company was liquidated in pieces. Remington's firearms business went to a new entity called Arms. The ammunition business, one of the most valuable assets in the portfolio, was acquired by Vista Outdoor. The Marlin brand was purchased by Ruger, which immediately began rebuilding what Cerberus had destroyed. The Ilion, New York factory, the same facility Eliphalet Remington had established in 1828, the one that had produced rifles for Union soldiers and Allied forces and American hunters for nearly 2 centuries, closed its doors in 2023. 207 years of continuous American manufacturing ended. About 270 workers lost their jobs. The equipment was packed up and shipped to Georgia. The buildings, some dating to 1916, were left behind. Cerberus Capital Management was fine. They had moved on years earlier. What's left? Arms is operating today out of LaGrange, Georgia. They're making Model 870 shotguns and Model 700 rifles. The quality, by most accounts, is improving. Ruger's version of the Marlin lever action has been widely praised, proof that the underlying designs were never the problem. The problem was who was running the company and why. But here's the hard truth. You cannot undo 200 years of trust once you've spent 13 years destroying it. The serious gun buyers, the hunters, the competitive shooters, the collectors who knew what a Remington was supposed to feel like, made their decisions during the Cerberus years. Many of them haven't come back. Somewhere in America right now, a man is at a gun show turning over a pre-2007 Remington Model 700 in his hands. He's checking the finish, the action, the barrel stamp. He'll pay more for it than a new one costs at the gun store down the street. Not because it's old, because it was made when the people building it still had something to prove. That's what Cerberus bought in 2007. A 200-year-old promise built on precision and pride. That's what they spent 13 years unwinding. And that's what no amount of restructuring in Georgia is ever fully going to get back. The oldest gunmaker in America didn't die in a bankruptcy court. It died one cost-cutting decision at a time, made by people who saw a balance sheet where everyone else saw a legacy. If this story hit you the way it hit me, drop a comment below with the oldest Remington you still own. I want to hear it. And if you want more stories about the American brands, companies, and craftsmen that built this country, and the people who took them apart, hit subscribe and ring the bell.